I'll kick it off with a little teaching, a little expounding on some ideas I'm thinking about, then open it up to questions and conversation with all of you. So, our subject for today is, how do you create a deep, intimate, loving relationship with yourself? Because most of us want deep, loving, intimate relationships, and most of us find deep, loving, intimate relationships challenging. And it seems on the face of it like, oh, if only this person would behave better, if only they would treat me the way that I want them to, then I'd be happy and everything would be hunky-dory. Of course, those of us who've been around the block a few times know that there's probably something faulty with that line of reasoning. Because I don't know about you, but I've been in a lot of different relationships and seen a lot of the same challenges crop up in different relationships with different people. And so I realized at some point, the problem must not be that I haven't found the right person to hang out with, because I've been hanging out with a lot of different people and having similar challenges. And the lowest common denominator in all of those situations is me. So if you get hip to it, you know that the great spiritual opportunity of relationships is that they are a mirror for you, and how they show you your own blind spots, or they show you the ways in which you are not so great yet at taking care of yourself. And they reflect you back on yourself and remind you of your own need to create a more loving relationship with yourself. So, what do I mean, a loving relationship with yourself? Well, just as a for instance, in a lot of relationships, I used to have the complaint of I'm feeling kind of or neglected emotionally, or that they're not as emotionally available to me as I want. And what I had to realize over time was, there seems to be some way in which I am abandoning myself, some way in which I am not emotionally available to myself. And that these breakdowns in the outer relationships were a reflection of the breakdown in the inner relationship, myself to myself. Now, of course, there's only one of you theoretically, but physically, but we actually find it useful to acknowledge that in many ways we're all mildly schizophrenic. In other words, we all have a sort of multiple personality disorder, meaning you are not just you. You are not just the one unitary person that you imagine yourself to be. It's more like you are a community. You are a collection of selves. You have all of these voices and feelings inside you that often seem to be in conflict with each other, at odds with each other. There's kind of a conflict of interests happening inside a lot of the time. We can call these different voices subpersonalities or inner parts, and people have, in common parlance, people talk about my inner critic or my inner child. This reflects the common experience of noticing that there's these different voices and feelings at work within you at the same time, or that seem to be different than the way you think of yourself. So part of creating a loving relationship with yourself is starting to acknowledge all of these different voices and parts within you. And I actually think of it as like facilitating conversation or doing couples work with the different parts of myself that are sometimes arguing or in conflict with each other. Better job of that, then I am less dependent on and reactive to the people outside of me for not behaving the way that I think that they should. There's a Tibetan Buddhist teacher I liked who said, well, loneliness, if you experience loneliness, it's just a symptom of the breakdown of the communication between the inner masculine and the inner feminine. The man and the woman inside are not speaking to each other or are arguing. And that if you heal that relationship, that you don't suffer from loneliness in the same kind of way. Another, perhaps even deeper part of forming this intimate, loving relationship with yourself is that these different parts in you seem to have a mind of their own and a voice of their own. And they seem, as I said, to be talking from different points of view. But I like to say that each of those parts also has a body of their own, meaning along with that voice comes a lot of feelings, actual feelings in your body, sensations in your body. And if you start really paying attention to yourself, listening to yourself, communicating with yourself, what you're also inviting is a deeper connection with your own feelings. And I mean feelings at the sensational level. So part of forming a loving relationship with yourself means being willing to sit with and in your own sensations as they arise, waves of feeling, you know. Say you're feeling really hurt or you're feeling really mad. Well, there's a whole constellation of sensations that comes along with that. Maybe your breathing is shallow and there's tightness across your chest, or you feel your heart pounding, or there's kind of a knot in your stomach, or you feel kind of nauseous, or there's a lump in your throat. All of these different kinds of sensations that, for the most part, you would rather avoid. You'd rather not even be conscious of them. And most of the time, most people aren't. Most of the time, most people are doing everything they can to avoid feeling all those sensations in their own body. Whether that's individually with the kinds of what I call sensation management strategies that are typical addictions, like, you know, alcohol or cigarettes or eating too much or whatever it is, or even in our relationships with others, we engage sensation management strategies. If I start blaming you when I'm angry, it's a way of actually trying to escape the physical experience of anger in my body and taking responsibility for it and feeling it. And of course, we all do that sometimes. We just kind of launch into, you know, here's what you did wrong. Here's why it's your fault that I'm not feeling good right now. But if we get past that and stop and slow down, we'll acknowledge, oh, there's a bunch of sensations in my body right now that I'm not wanting to be with. And can I choose to instead face those, lean towards them, experience them fully? And as we do so, that willingness starts to uh, stop the process of fanning the flames. You start thinking less, being less involved in the stories that you have running that justify your feelings to yourself. And you start actually more just feeling and digesting the feelings themselves, and they become more manageable, more workable. And the willingness to do that kind of what I call emotional metabolism with yourself, whether it's in the context of relating to others or when it's all by yourself, is part of that creating a loving relationship with yourself. Sometimes people think a loving relationship with yourself means, oh, I say nice things about me, you know, I'm a good person, blah, blah, blah. Every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. Well, yeah, okay, that's one version of loving yourself, but actually I think it's one, and the deeper one is, are you willing to be fully present with yourself in the moment and experience your own experience fully, which is sometimes really unpleasant. Sometimes it's like the equivalent of holding a crying baby, you know, who's screaming or colicky or whatever, and the sound hurts your ears, but you choose to be with that baby and hold it and rock it, and you don't tell it you shouldn't be feeling this way. You don't tell it shut up now. You just rock it and sway it and bounce it and walk with it and do whatever you need to do. I remember there were times when I was going through some rough stuff emotionally, and I just took myself out walking. It was the middle of the night, but I just like walked down empty streets back and forth, because I was feeling a lot in my body and I knew I wasn't going to be able to sleep anyway. So I took myself out walking in the dark, and that was soothing. So there's various ways that you go about creating this more loving, intimate relationship with yourself. And as you do, that makes you a less codependent person. You become more and more someone who is already able to satisfy themselves, who can approach another person and say, I know I'm 100% responsible for my happiness, and that you don't owe me anything. And I know you're responsible for your happiness, and I don't owe you anything. So, from that position, let's see if we can dance together. Let's see if we want some of the same things, if we can enjoy uh, playing together. And I'm not approaching it from a desperate place or from a position of needing to control you and tell you how to be. And, you know, to the extent that we can pull that off, relationships, much more intimate, loving, accepting relationships than um, is the norm out there in the world. But yeah, that's mostly, I think, what I wanted to kick off with, is that idea that if you really want to create relationships with others, then the foundation of that is the kind of loving relationship that you have with yourself. And the more that you're looking to other people to fix something for you that you can't handle yourself, then the more pressure you put on those relationships, and the more of a power struggle they turn into. Whereas the more willing you are to really love and take care of yourself, then the more able you are to create relationships that are cooperative and not based on obligation, but are rather based on inspiration. So, given all that, feel free to ask me any questions that you have about it all.
Thanks, Tabor. And as a reminder for everyone, if you want to ask a question, you can either type it in the Facebook comments if you're on Facebook Live, or send me a note here on the chat, and I will get you on. It looks like Eric's got his hand up. So, Eric, I'm going to put you on the screen. So, just a fair warning, we're all going to see you. And I hope you're ready. Now, 1 second. Oops, maybe we brought on Andreas. Hang on 1 second. Hang on. Sorry about that. Just 1 second. Eric, I'm coming for you eventually. There you are. All right. All right, Eric, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
All right.
Hear and see me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. Nice to see you.
Hi there, Eric.
Nice to see you again. My question is about the body feelings. I'm regularly watching myself as I get into all sorts of situations, especially recently with my parents. I sat down with them and, like for some frank conversations.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, I watched my body reacting, but my question is like, what's the impact of that? What's the point of noting my, like chest going tighter and
Like feeling sensations. What's the point? What's the good of it?
yeah, like if I note them and then they are there, good. And then what? Like, is there
Yeah,
anything
that's a good
else?
question. That's a good question. Well, let's look at it this way. On some level, ordinary people are busy being led around by the nose by their own unconscious fear of experiencing some kinds of sensations and desire to experience other kinds of sensations. Okay? They're not consciously planning it out, but unconsciously, they're automatically trying to avoid anything that will stir up the kinds of sensations they don't want to feel, or trying to control other people or themselves or their situations to try to get the kinds of sensations that they do want to have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that unconsciously, they're living in a state of fear. They're unconsciously trying to manage life and themselves and other people all the time to make sure that I don't feel the kinds of sensations that I don't want to feel, and that I do feel more of the kind of sensations that I do want to feel.
So by then, sorry, go on.
And there's also another dynamic, which is that various kinds of situations will stir up a great big bunch of feeling that'll be experienced as kind of traumatic, too much, I don't want to feel it. And so the person will kind of stuff it down. And that will add to kind of a backlog of feelings. So then it's not just the sensations that any kind of current time situation stirs up, is that the current time situation stirs up a bunch of sensations from my past that I've been storing up in this backlog. I call them like rocks in your backpack that you're packing around. So when we start having these kinds of honest conversations that you're talking about, or when we start meditating and sitting and noticing sensations on purpose, or when you try not to avoid the feelings that anything in life currently is stirring up for you, then several things are happening. One, you are reprogramming this automatic fear you have of sensation. And instead of automatically avoiding something uncomfortable and trying to replace it with something more comfortable. Here, I'll have a. Instead, you're cultivating your ability to just stay put, your ability to stay centered, your ability to compassionately welcome whatever is coming up in the moment, you see? And that takes a kind of courage and patience and acceptance and compassion that we don't normally have, that most people don't normally have. So first of all, you are cultivating that kind of willingness. And then once you have done that and you're sitting in that spot and all of this stuff is coming up, then it's like you're emptying your backpack slowly. It's like you're slowly burning up that backlog of uncomfortable sensations that you were avoiding. So in the process of sitting still, letting it arise, letting yourself feel it, staying present, it's like it's burning up. It's like things are being digested. I call it emotional metabolism, where it's sort of like you're letting the experience arise, you're chewing it up, you're digesting it, you're letting go of what you don't need anymore, you're being nourished by what you can be nourished by. So this this meditation of being present with all of that sensation arising is like love in action and is healing in and of itself. And the more that you do it, the more you will notice patterns start to change, or you start to change without fixing yourself. It's not like you did something to improve your problem, but just by being willing to experience your experience more fully, a kind of transformation happens that's like natural evolution. It's not like you in charge of something. It's like life unfolding the way that it needs to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think then you're talking about releasing and letting go, and not really. Previously, I thought that the importance of actually saying it out loud and telling it to the other one that that's how I feel in my body right now is very important. Yeah, but now I think it's just simply watching it and then watching it change, and also not being fearful of it, I guess. So don't be afraid of what's actually going on.
Not having open, honest conversations with people we care about or are angry with is part of how we habitually avoid sensations most of the time. So when we start having those open-hearted conversations with people, we're inviting more sensation to arise. And as far as naming the sensations themselves out loud to the person that you're talking with, that's not crucial. It just helps you stay present to it. It helps you experience the experience that you're having. Like, as I like to say, if you're talking to your mother-in-law, you might not say, wow, I'm noticing my armpits are really sweating and, my back itches and stuff like that. You might just say, I'm feeling tense right now, If it's with somebody that is really committed to this kind of mutual meditation, then you might be more specific in your naming of the body sensations. But one way or another, you want to keep bringing your awareness back to your body so that you can experience what you're experiencing in your body as you're communicating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to go ahead and hide you again. Taves, the next question is from Robert, who's just done the Soul Purpose course. And he's asking a question about how what you're talking about here with kind of the different parts differs, if at all, from what you're talking about in the Purpose course. Is it actually the same thing?
Yes, it is the same thing, basically. In the Purpose work, we talk about creating more inner harmony and inner alignment with yourself in order to open up the channels to more inner guidance or intuition or whatever you want to refer to that process as. So that kind of creating harmony, alignment with your parts is another term for creating a loving relationship with yourself, or in this case, yourselves, plural. So yeah, it's all part of the same work. If you do that inner parts work well, and you do that inner emotional metabolism well, then you create a more loving relationship with yourself or yourselves, and that allows you both to create more loving relationships in the outer world with other people, and to create relationship with deeper parts of yourself, the ones that we were saying had information about your purpose.
Rob, if you have any follow-up or anything like that, you can just send me a note. Tabe, I have a question from you from Facebook, and the question is along the lines of, you've talked about a lot of the ways to practice this, but could you get really specific? Like, I'm going to go to work tomorrow, and how do I actually do this day to day while I go through my life when I'm not in a workshop or when I'm not, meditating or something like that?
Yeah. Well, because I could use a lot of different kinds of real life examples, but because the example for this call was potentially people who wanted to create more loving, intimate relationship in their life with someone else or some other people, why don't I use that example? Say you're at home by yourself and you're thinking, oh, I'm so lonely, and if only I had somebody in my life right now, if only I found the man of my dreams, or if only I found the perfect woman, then everything would be beautiful. That's what I need in order to be happy. Well, that's a self-defeating way of thinking. And instead, what you want to be doing at that moment is stopping and saying, oh, okay, Tabor, how are you feeling right now? And you can actually do this process. We've talked about it in the Purpose Work course or in workshops. You can do a process of either having two empty chairs, physical chairs that you put in the room and that you sit in and go back and forth, or you can do it journaling in a script form where you write the name of a part of you that's active and another part of you that's talking with it. So you could either have a chair or or write in your journal or on your computer, like lonely self or the lonely one, and then have it say, if only I found the such and person of my dreams, I'd be feeling so much better. Then you would move to the other chair or switch to, or write a different name, like, your own name, or interviewer or facilitator or counselor, and then you'd say, so sounds like you're feeling really lonely right now, kind of sad. And you might have this dialogue back and forth, switching between chairs or back and forth in journal script form, what Carl Jung called active imagination. And you create a conversation between these different parts of yourself. And you start asking that self, what does loneliness and sadness really feel like? What does it feel like in your body right now? And then you could sit with yourself and feel the actual waves of sensation that go along with loneliness or sadness or whatever. And you could start to cultivate a part of yourself that could talk lovingly and compassionately to that sad and lonely one, like a compassionate parent or a counselor, like I said before, and say, oh, yeah, I understand. You're feeling sad right now. Tell me all about it, and what does it feel like in your body? And then you could also ask, what shall we do? In what ways do we want to try to reach out to others? And what can we do to start to create that relationship you want? But you would be doing so from a place of loving yourself rather than kind of desperate action trying to fix your situation. Instead, the main point is, I am loving myself right now by going out to a coffee shop and striking up some conversations. Or I am loving myself right now by making a personals ad. And you're very much aware that the way that you are taking care of yourself is the primary part. If you are doing a good job of taking care of yourself and loving yourself in those ways, it doesn't matter as much when somebody comes into your life. When the time is right, that will happen. But until it does, you know that you are busy loving yourself in these ways that I've been talking about. Or if you're trying to be in a relationship with somebody and getting triggered and it feels like, shit, this relationship is not working, then rather than banging your head against the wall, sometimes you say, okay, I'm going to step out now and go a loving relationship with self. I'm going to go spend some time by myself. I'm going to do some of that empty chair work or some of that journaling. I'm going to do some meditating or feeling the sensations in my body that I've been avoiding. And you'll use that conscious cultivation of a loving relationship with yourself as a way to not bang your head against the wall with somebody else in the power struggle or the unproductive conflict or just feeling lonely, because a lot of people are in relationships where they feel like, I don't really feel connected, it's just kind of distant. I hope those are practical enough examples for you. Of course, it's a big subject, and I do counseling with people around it because it is a big subject. So I can only drop hints over a call like this, but I hope that gives you a sense.
Thanks, Tabor. And just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions, you can raise your hand or you can send me a message and I can ask it for you or put you on the screen. Tabor, one more from the internet, and it kind of ties to what you were just saying. It's a question around, what happens if I am doing all this work and my partner isn't, and I find that I'm getting lonelier and lonelier? What do I do, or how do I deal with that? I just heard you say spend some time alone, but what else is there that people can do?
That is a really great question. Now, of course, there's no simple answer to that, and it will all depend on you and your situation. But when you are in that relationship and it seems like, oh, I'm doing more of the work, I'm more interested in change than they are and stuff, then you have to start asking yourself, what is the best way of loving myself in this situation? Now, it could be that staying in the relationship, but letting go of the need to control the other person or what they do, staying in the relationship, but just rigorously taking care of yourself in the context of the relationship, which could include saying like, oh, I notice I'm, feeling lonely right now. So I'm going to spend some time, taking a bath or journaling and something like that. Or it could look like getting better at asking for what you want from your partner, but then communicating really clearly. You have no obligation to say, yes, I accept your no about anything. And it's sometimes useful to stay in the relationship, but with the strong commitment to the fact of, I am 100% responsible for my own happiness, and they don't owe me anything. I can ask for what I want, but they have a total right to say yes or no. And sometimes I might feel like I'm sort of a monk living inside of a relationship and using the challenges of that relationship as grist for the mill of my spiritual practice. On the other hand, sometimes when you start really asking yourself, what's the best way of loving myself in this situation, you realize that you're holding on too tight. You're trying to make something work and you're banging your head against the wall. And in that instance, hopefully you can come to your partner without a bunch of blame and say, wow, I'm starting to wonder if we really want the same things, because I notice I'm wanting more of this and this and that. And I can't tell that you want that. Tell me, what do you really, really want? And let's have an honest conversation about whether we really do want the same things. And if we don't, that's okay. If we don't, we will love each other, forgive each other, bless each other on our own ways, on our own separate paths as we reach this fork in the road, and share as much gratitude as we can for the past. And there might be some cleanup you need to do before that, because usually people reach that potential fork in the road time with a backlog of the kind of pain that I was talking about. And so you want to clean that up as best you can before you even start to talk about, do we want the same things or not? But yeah, it's a big subject. It's a big subject. It's about taking full responsibility for your own path, not expecting them to do anything to make you happy, and being willing to ask them for real honest conversations about how you're each feeling and whether you do want the same things or not, and whether you stay in the relationship and learn to love yourself better, take care of yourself better within the context of the relationship, or whether you learn to love and take care of yourself better by letting go when it's time to do that. There is no knowing which is the right choice for you, except by listening more deeply to yourself.
Thanks, Tabor. Next question is from Rob again. And the question is actually one that I have a lot. And it's, does being present with the uncomfortable feelings mean that they eventually go away? And if I may add a little thing myself, what if they never go away? There's a little fear that I have.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's a paradox, because the one who asks, how soon will they go away? Is this going to make me feel better? How quickly will it make me feel better? The one who's asking that is generally the voice of, and the irony is, what we want to progressively cultivate is the attitude of, I'm willing to be with this forever. I'm willing to be with this as long as it takes. And I'm not counting the minutes until it passes. It's sort of like holding that baby that I was talking about before, that crying baby. If you're holding that crying baby and you're saying, are you almost done? Are you almost done yet? Come on, come on. How much longer are you going to do this? Well, that's not really very soothing to the baby, right? You want to bring the attitude to the baby of, I'm yours for as long as you need me. Now, it's also true that the more you become willing to do that, the more capable and patient you become in that way, the more those feelings do come and go, and the more you clear out that backlog of stuff that I was talking about, and you become lighter and less emotionally reactive and less resistant to the feelings that are coming up, because you'll find that the suffering that we do emotionally is a combination of the pain that arises initially, and then all the suffering of resisting and fighting and fearing that pain that's arising. And the more willing you become to be with it, the less of that suffering with resistance you do. And so the less painful the experience that you're willing to be with becomes. But it's also true that at the same time, you're cultivating the attitude of, I don't need it to be any different than it is. I don't need it to change with any degree of rapidity. And it's kind of one of those universal paradoxes where, to the degree that I don't need it to be any different, it probably will be different. To the degree that I'm counting the minutes and trying to make it change, the more it will tend to hang around.
Thanks, Tibbs. Question here from Rita. Rita, do you want to ask your question live? You can just let me know in the chat or by typing in another question, or would you like me to ask it?
Come on live. Come on.
Okay, now I'll go ahead and ask it. And is it okay with you if I read it as is? I'll just give her one more second. Yes, okay. So question is, I'm sexually open, but I'm afraid that I should hold off to learn more about my potential lover. But in the moment, all I want is sex too. How does someone balance those two things?
What? I didn't
Want me
quite
to read
get
it? I'll read it again. I'm sexually open, but I'm also afraid that I should hold off to learn more about my potential lover. But I also want sex at the same time. So I guess the question is, do you hold off and wait to get to know someone and really feel connected with them? And when do you follow that? Or then when do you kind of follow your more like carnal instincts of like, I just really want to have sex with somebody?
Yeah. Well, that's another opportunity. I'm getting the echo again. Okay, now I'm not. That's another opportunity for you to cultivate a truly loving relationship with yourself. Because as I said, there are lots of selves inside of Rita. And there's the self that's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm hungry. And there's the self that's like, oh, but I'm not sure if I trust this guy yet. Or there's the self that's like ready to fall in love and get attached and doesn't know if that's really where he's at and stuff like that. So I suggest you go slow enough to make sure that you're checking in with all the different parts of yourself, and notice particularly if there are any parts of you that are scared about having sex, or there is no should about you should get to know her better. You're like 100% yes if all of the parts of you were in alignment about, hey, let's just have some really fun, hot and sweaty, casual boot knocking sex, then go for it. The question is whether all of the parts of you are in alignment about what you actually want. Sometimes people will charge ahead because the part of themselves that's like lusty, yeah, let's do this thing, got a hold of the mic, so to speak, and pulled you down that road. And then afterwards, they have what I call the sexual hangover, where there's like, oh, but now I feel kind of weird or awkward, or now I feel hurt that he hasn't, called me back as much as I thought he would, or knows what. So the real question is, what do all parts of Rita actually want? And listening to all of those and making sure that they are in communication with each other and in alignment before you charge ahead. It's kind of like building a consensus between the various parts of you rather than letting one or more of your parts run roughshod over the other ones. And that's part of loving yourself.
All right. We got a little bit of follow-up from Rita. I think it's more of a comment, but Tabor, just in case you want to share a little something more, she said, that's the problem. All my parts are fine, but later I find that they're able to be deeply connected. And she said she wants the whole enchilada.
Later you find that they're able to be deeply connected. I'm not sure I know what that means. I think what you're saying is that you feel good about having sex, and then sometimes later you're a little sad that the person you had sex with doesn't seem as motivated for deep connection and intimacy ongoingly as you are. Is that right?
Well, let's see. Yes, that is correct.
Right. So that's an example of what I mean about making sure that all parts are on board. So if I were you, in honor of those parts that know they want deep connection, I would probably talk to that person that you were considering having sex with and saying, hey, I'm attracted to you. This feels sexy. This feels fun. And I have the impulse to run with it. And I noticed that something that I really do want is, as you put it, the whole enchilada, not just a sexy good time, but a deep, ongoing, intimate kind of relationship. How available do you think you are for that? How motivated are you to create that with me? And start to have those conversations with them in advance. And of course, whatever they say is not 100% reliable, because they might say, oh yeah, I'm all about the deep relationship, intimacy, blah, blah, blah. And then in a couple of days, they are singing a different tune. That's possible. But again, the real point is, are you loving yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? And in your case, I think part of you loving and taking care of yourself is you having a conversation beforehand with your potential partner about how interested are you in creating this kind of deep soul connection or intimacy or love or whatever it is that you, Rita, really want, and see how they respond, and then see how you feel inside yourself in response to their response, and let that guide you on what comes next, so to speak.
Thanks, Dave. And we have a bit of a follow-up question from Dave. And what he wants to know is, are there any specific tips for when that love addict voice has the mic? How do you keep yourself from getting too attached?
Well, one cue is how you feel in your body. I said that each of these parts has a mind of their own, and I said that each of these parts has a body of their own. So if there is a part of you that you feel accurate about calling sort of an addict, then get to know the body feelings of that addict. Does your heart start beating harder? Is your breath more rapid and shallow? Are you tight in your stomach? Blah, blah, blah. If you're in that kind of then you're probably operating under the influence of one of those kinds of parts that you don't necessarily want to run with. That's why I said to Rita, go in slow motion, make it a meditation. Oh, I notice I really want to grab, like in that way. And what else is going on? How am I feeling, And ask around inside yourself, how's everybody doing? And see if you can well, I often use the example of my Zen teacher, who, when I first was starting to learn how to meditate, I went to with the question of, every time I sit down to meditate, I start itching and fidgeting and instead of saying, I know I'm supposed to. And he said, well, it's not that there's anything you're supposed to do. It's not that scratching an itch is bad. It's that it's compulsive and automatic. So next time you sit down, sit still, and then when you feel an itch arise, don't do anything. Sit still with the itch and feel the itch. Feel the shape of the itch and the depth of the itch and the movement of the itch. And see if through your attention it changes and fades. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Reach for the itch in slow motion, scratch it in slow motion, notice what it feels like to scratch the itch, slowly pull your hand away, and now feel the place where the itch was and notice how it's changing, and see if then it subsides. So the problem is not whether you scratch an itch or don't scratch an itch. The problem is that usually there's this automatic itch, scratch, itch, scratch, itch, scratch. There's this compulsive linkage. So that's why I say slow down. Feel the itch. Know that there's plenty of time to scratch if that's what you're going to do. There's also a saying from the old Christian mystics who said, holy desires only grow stronger with delay, by which they meant that the desires which really serve you will persist even if you wait, but the ones that don't will probably wither away if you don't act on them quickly. So I would say to you, Dave, slow down. Notice how you're feeling in your body. Are you stressed? Are you anxious? Are you in a hurry to make something happen? Or can you arrive at a place of, I think I would prefer to do this than that, but there's no desperation in it. And let's see what happens. And then if you take action, and you notice the feelings of taking action, and you notice how good or not good it feels. And you make it all your meditation. But speed favors that more compulsive, addictive behavior. And lack of deep breathing and anxiety and tightness in the body are a good sign that you're not choosing from an inspired place.
Thanks, Tabes. We've got time for, I think, one more question. And Kasia is asking, on the way to getting consensus between all the parts of Kasia, I many times feel angry at myself. If I do the hot seats, can one part of me resent the other? And then she says, I think I heard no, but I want to know it from Tabor, yes or no, and if no, why wouldn't I? So again, the question is, can one part of herself resent the other? Maybe talk a little bit more about the hot seat work.
Yeah, they definitely can. I think the misunderstanding arose from sometimes in the communication work, people will say, Well, I'm mad at myself for even listening to you or something like that. And we will suggest that that's probably more an instance of turning anger towards someone else back on yourself in order to avoid true communication with the other. So in that instance, it's say, tell that person, I'm mad at you for what you said to me, not I'm mad at myself for even listening to you. And oftentimes people will use uh, anger at themselves or guilt, which is a form usually of turning anger in on yourself, as a substitute for having an honest conversation with somebody else. So that's something to be aware of. All that said, yes, you will find conflict rages inside of you oftentimes, that there's anger inside of you. Like in the retreat, we talked about the top dog, bottom dog game, or the inner critic and the inner child, or the critical parent and the wounded child. And they will be arguing. And when you're doing that empty chair work or you're doing that journaling, it's actually more productive to have them admit, I hate you right now, than to have them just kind of say snotty, passive aggressive things or call each other a loser or say you're so mean to me or something like that. It's actually progress to have those parts acknowledge how angry they are. As you stay with it and you go deeper, hopefully you weigh layers and you start getting down to sort of like, what is it that part of you is really wanting or really afraid of that has them so angry, has them feeling threatened. And so as you stay with that inner work, that parts work, those parts should theoretically get less angry and start listening to each other more and being more cooperative. But you have to go ahead and let yourself feel everything that you feel along the way to that greater cooperation, which might include a lot of anger sometimes. And that internal anger may again reveal outer anger. Like you're sitting there doing work with yourself and you get angry at a part of yourself, and then you realize that a part of yourself is reminding you of your mother and that you're angry at your mother. And so I was like, okay, parts, I hear you. I need to go talk to my mother.
Thanks, Tabes. So we've got one more question. Well, first, let me give you Kastria's response. She says, thanks for the answer, Tabor. It's clear for me now, and I appreciate you for mentioning top dog, bottom dog, and peeling off the layers. And with that, why don't we go to Dave's question, which he says you kind of started answering, but why don't we make that our last one for today? And that is, do you have any tips for how and where to look inside to communicate with the self when the other person cuts off all communication? So, want me to read that again? Did that make sense?
I think so. I think you're saying you've been trying to communicate with someone else and then they cut off all communication, and then how do you move from trying to communicate with them to communicating differently, healingly with yourself?
That is what he said, yes. So you're on the right track.
Okay, so first of all, peel yourself away from others. Give yourself some nice, quiet, healing place to be with yourself, whether that's like in the tub or in your meditation room or sitting in an easy chair, and start paying attention to what your experience actually is. Now, that could mean either that you start noticing really uncomfortable sensations in your body that you don't want to be with, and you'll notice that your mind starts going to like, oh, if only she would call me back, or, I can't believe that I blah, blah, blah. And your mind starts obsessing about that person who's not there, that person who won't talk to you. And you acknowledge intellectually that obsessing mentally about someone who's not even there is an addiction. It's a form of what I called sensation management strategy. So if you can, you could just refocus your awareness again and again off of that thinking about them and back onto your body. And what am I feeling in my body right now that I don't want to be with? And you start that emotional metabolism of letting yourself feel things through your body. If your mind is too busy and it's hard to even focus on your body in that way, you can, again, treat that one who is obsessing about the missing person as a part. And you can start talking to that part that's obsessing. You could call it the obsessor if you wanted to, or the lonely one, or the rejected one, or whatever you want to call it. And either with an empty chair or in journaling format, you could say, sounds like you're, really upset, really mad, really scared, really hurt about her not calling you back, about being alone. And tell me more about that. And they tell you more about that, and you say, oh yeah, and how are you feeling? How are you feeling in your body, or what emotion are you feeling as you're saying all that? So you start lovingly dialoguing with the part of yourself that is wanting to obsess about someone else, so that your awareness and your attention is gradually brought off of that other person where it doesn't really belong, and back onto yourself, back onto the voices in your head, back onto the sensations inside your body, back onto the process of experiencing your own experience fully, so that it can come and go.
Thanks,
And
Dave.
that willingness to do that is loving yourself.
I know I said that last one was our last question, but we've got one more in that I would really like to hear an answer to. And you talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth asking again. And it's from Ana Luisa. And she's asking, how can I deal with an overwhelming feeling of loneliness?
Well, I've been getting at that at different points in the call. But first of all, do you want to get on the video, Ana Luisa?
You should probably go ahead, Tabe. There's a little bit of a lag between Facebook and Zoom, and
Oh, okay.
it takes some time to sign up. So
She's on Facebook.
Facebook, yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, I would say to you right now, can you experience loneliness in this moment? Because again, the processes that we're talking about ultimately are always like a form of meditation, a form of compassionate awareness practice that happens right now in the moment. So when the way to work with loneliness is to feel loneliness in the moment. And then you start to break it down. Well, what is loneliness? Loneliness is a combination of certain thoughts going through my mind, certain stories or things I'm telling myself, maybe even pictures, and certain sensations in my body that I don't enjoy, that I don't really want to experience. And so maybe you hear a voice that says, I feel so alone, or if only someone would be treating me differently than he or she is. And you feel maybe heaviness in your body, or a shortness of breath, or a caving in your chest. And you let yourself really be aware of that, and you cultivate the attitude that loneliness is not an experience to be avoided. It's an experience for you to get curious about, for you to get compassionate with. And you start, if that voice is really busy in your head, like I said, you can start dialoguing with that voice and saying, sounds like you feel really sad. Sounds like you don't want to be feeling the feeling that you're having right now, and you wish someone would do something to help you feel differently. And would you be willing to feel exactly what you feel right now with me? And tell me about that. How does that feel in your body right now? Or you can go just yourself feel everything. If you stay in your body and you notice you want to yell, then you yell. If you stay in your body and you notice you start to cry, then cry. If you stay in your body and you notice that there's a tight lump in your throat and you're basically holding back your crying, and you say, oh yeah, you're scared to go into crying and you're holding it back right now. I understand. And your patience and your understanding will allow that resistance to melt gradually. And as your resistance and your fear melts, then those emotions will start to flow more freely. And as those emotions start to flow more freely, you will have what you might call multiple orgasms of emotion, whether that's a sadness orgasm, followed by a little anger orgasm, followed by some gratitude or appreciation for what you have shared with someone in the past. And, you just ride the waves of those feelings. The more your resistance falls away, the more your willingness grows, the less painful those waves of emotion become, or the less difficult they become, even if they are painful. You're just letting them flow through you like you're an open tube and they're just flowing through. Before that, you get to work with your resistance. You get to work with how you're wanting to mentally obsess on someone who's not here, or how life would be better if only X, Y, and Z. Or you get to notice how you're holding your breath or tightening your body against the possibility of feeling all of that stuff. So, yeah, it's a very patient-minded and compassionately hearted form of meditation and choosing to be with yourself. And you could, as I said, set up 2 chairs and put the one who feels so lonely in one of those chairs, and then sit in the other chair and say, I see you. I see how lonely you feel right now. I see how you're sad. I'm here with you now. I told you before that tantric Tibetan Buddhist teacher said that loneliness was a symptom of a breakdown between the inner masculine and feminine. So if it's the inner feminine, if this symbolism works for you, it's just one form of symbolism, but you could say that if the inner feminine in you is really lonely, that you cultivate your own inner masculine that can hold her and say, yeah, I know you're lonely right now. You're sad right now. Sometimes I even envision that internally in the body. Like if your own guts and your own insides are the feminine part of yourself, your own heart and guts and insides and all the emotions that live in them are your inner feminine, and your spine and your ribs and your skull are like your inner masculine that contains and holds and is centered and strong for that part of yourself. If that imagery speaks to you, you could practice just like sitting up and feeling the length and strength of your spine and your ribs holding you, surrounding you, and inside of that container, inside of that holding, let your whole insides be soft and flow and move and breathe and heartbeat and blood flow and emotions flow, and use the masculine part of yourself to stay awake, to stay centered, to stay present with you, and use the feminine part of yourself to feel and flow and move and breathe. So that's a few suggestions. I have spent a lot of time being with loneliness myself, and I think loneliness is a wonderful invitation to learn, as I say, to love yourself.
Thanks, Tabor, and thanks, Ana Luisa, for that question. So, Tabor, we're pretty much out of time, but I did want to give you a couple minutes if you wanted to say any wrap up or closing remarks before we finish up today's call.
Yeah, well, I'm still in the midst of my grand international tour. We're in Beirut, Lebanon now, and from here we'll be headed to Petra in Jordan and to Egypt and the pyramids and the Nile and all that. And then I'll be at a festival in Lithuania called Masters of Calm. So if you happen to be near Lithuania, join us there. And then I'll be doing a couple more workshops in the UK, a Radical Honesty Trainers Training and a Revolutionary Relating Weekend. Those will both be in August, and you're both warmly invited to those, or you're warmly invited to both of those. And you will be offering the Purpose course, the Purpose online course again in the fall, and coming out with more stateside workshops soon that you're welcome to join us for. And you can always find me on taberg.com, .org, taberji.org, O-R-G, and join our mailing list. And I do video sessions with individuals or couples or people that need to have transformational conversations. So I am here. Feel free to reach out to me over Facebook anytime. And as I said, my focus and wish for you out of today's call was that you start learning to love others and create the kind of loving relationships and conscious community that you want in your life by really learning to love yourself. And that in a peacemaking and reconciling sort of way. And it looks like being more and more willing to love the soft animal body that you inhabit and all of the sensations that are flowing through you morning, noon, and night and wanting your attention while you are usually busy resisting them or ignoring them. I invite you to start the simple but challenging process of the meditation of being aware of sensation 24 hours a day as you can, while you're brushing your teeth, while you're driving your car, and yes, while you're having a conversation. Notice what you're feeling in your body. So even now, right now, as you breathe, as you hear the sound of my voice, notice what you're feeling in your body right now. Sensations in your chest or your belly or your face. And know that your willingness to attend to yourself like that, moment by moment, is cultivating love for yourself, is growing and exercising the muscle of compassion and patience and acceptance of your own experience, which sounds deceptively simple but will change everything. Good luck with all that.
Thanks for that, Tabor. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye-bye.